Hey, welcome to the 189th episode of Just Shoot It, a podcast about filmmaking, screenwriting, and directing. This episode is brought to you by patron Austin Kress. I'm Oren Kaplan.
And I'm Matt Unlow. Today we've got Liz Shannon Miller on the show. She's a TV critic, a film critic. She writes for a ton of different publications. She focuses mostly on television, but I've known her for a long time. And it's a great conversation to have with a person who professionally loves, appreciates, and writes about film and TV for the last decade, basically.
Yeah, she definitely knows her film and TV. I mean, she's worked for Variety, for Indiewire. Now she's writing for Vulture. She's writing for AV Club.
Hollywood Reporter. Basically everywhere that you read criticism, she's written for.
Yeah, you might have seen her on a Rotten Tomatoes review before. What's interesting to me is I feel like the whole episode plays out like a series of unpaid endorsements because, you know, she'll be like, this show is so good, you know? And that show is so good. And I'm like, while we were talking to her, I was like, oh, that's a great recommendation. That
sounds good.
And she'll talk about other critics that she thinks are like amazing critics. And I'm like, oh, I should read those critics. My relationship with critics is I watch a movie. Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I like sense if people are saying it's good or not, you know, for me to see it.
Sure. The
like,
buzz.
More like
in the air.
The user score, the people, like Facebook, like whatever, that type of world. And then I'll watch a movie and then I'll go to Rotten Tomatoes and read like what the critics said about it because I want to see if they think the same thing that I think.
I am pretty anti-Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh, why?
Yeah, I think that it's kind of bad for film culture. Like I'm much more, and we talk about this a little bit in the episode, but I'm much more interested in tracking critics where my taste kind of aligns with them, and maybe they challenge me a little bit more, or maybe like I agree with them mostly, but not always, because that's a good way to be exposed to things that you wouldn't know that you would be into, right? Like if I know that this handful of critics that I think have really sophisticated, interesting, smart taste, or like an appreciation for the dumbest stuff in the world, which I also love. Like if I get them, I like their vibe, then that's important to me. And I think that Rotten Tomatoes just takes all of that personality and really what to me is important about criticism away. It's in the same way that like it bums me out to no end that we used to call, you know, movies and TV and literature art, and now we call it content.
Well, yeah, that's annoying. The content word bothers me more than the not art part.
But so the content thing is the problem. But really, what it boils down to is quantifying art as a number of hours, a library, right? It's just like, well, how much? What's the quantity of content that you have? How many hours of content do you have? You know, how many likes did it get? All of that stuff. And so it basically, I think, turns a thing that's very important to me and I've devoted my life to into a commodity that you just ship and trade. And so none of them are special. Content just means that nothing is special. And Rotten Tomatoes kind of does that to criticism.
Yeah, I guess I just use it think of it as a tool where I want to see all the top reviews from publications I've heard of, like the LA Times or Slate or whatever.
Sure.
Or /film of a movie I just saw, and I just want to see, like, you know, I really liked Us, but the ending I was a little off. I want to see if other people have said things about the ending.
And I would say that there are plenty of publications that I'm interested in, and then I'll go ahead and like follow those critics on Twitter or something like that.
Yeah.
And
I think you're just much deeper in the awareness of who you're reading and what you're reading about. And
fair enough.
I'm just a lot more surface
when
it comes to film criticism.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, I was a critical studies major in college. Like, right. I kind of went to film school in the like.
Yeah, and I studied computer science and engineering.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're going to quantify what's the median review versus like.
Yeah, I have some algorithms that tell me whether I'll like a movie or not. Exactly. Half the times I don't even watch it. I just tell people that I liked it.
Yeah, right.
Or didn't like it.
Do you ever watch movies at like speed and a half? Do you ever watch them in like sort of fast forward?
Only like YouTube videos.
Right.
It's not, I wouldn't watch like a real movie. But I've fallen asleep in my fair share.
Oh boy, listen.
Before we talk to Liz Shannon Miller, we wanted to remind you that we have a Patreon page. It's patreon.com/justshootitpod. And it is a way that if you feel like you get something out of this podcast, you can help us make it by giving us $1 a month, $2, whatever you want. If you give us $10 a month, even if it's only for 1 month, you will get a free Just Shoot It podcast hat mailed to your door. All that we ask is that you put it on, take a selfie, put it on Twitter, put it on Instagram, put it on Facebook, name your first child after it. Yeah. And that's it. Easy.
Little baby Just Shoot a hat.
Yeah. Don't just summon your baby and say just shoot it. Anyhow, check it out. Patreon.com/justshootitpod.
Also, I noticed
Helpful.
We are very close to reaching our first benchmark goal, actually. We're at $266 a month. We're aiming for $300, which was the original number that we thought would be our break-even point. In reality, we spend more than that a month on the show, but back in the day, that's what we thought it was going to be.
Yeah, well, Matt has a very complicated writer of what kind of snacks I have to have for him when he comes over to record the podcast.
Yeah. Oren only eats Ferrero Rochers. He eats like 15 a day. It's like pretty gross, and like the editors have a lot of work to do in kind of cutting out all of the lip smacking that happens as he's eating them.
Yes, well, I will not eat any less of a truffle. Well, great. Thanks, Matt. I'm excited for this interview.
Liz, you're a TV critic.
I'm a TV critic. I'm a TV journalist. I'm a TV watcher. I've been covering pop culture in various across various media since late 2006 professionally. I've been caring about TV since
the beginning.
Yeah,
right.
It's
since it was in color. How do you gauge like how like casual and or like
what sort
fun,
of
like the language?
you
I'm really
use?
curious about how like what review you could say pound town in and what review you can't.
It's very based. It depends on the outlet you're writing for. It depends on the context. It depends on the show. Like, you know, if you're writing about something like, say, Showtime's The Affair, you're gonna keep it pretty serious. Like, you know, it's not a show. There are things to make fun of on that show, but you wanna take it seriously to a degree.
Well, and I love that you use that as an example because you do write about that show pretty regularly.
Yeah.
But for Vulture, which I think is a pretty playful publication, right?
Yeah, I feel like I definitely have the leeway to be pretty silly at times, but I've been trying to keep like. I'm relatively new there, so I'm still trying to feel them out.
I just thought of this right now because I've not thought about this a lot, but being a TV critic is so different from being a film critic because with the film critic, like I feel like you say, I like this movie or I didn't like this movie and this is why. But with TV, you are investing, you know you have to watch the next episode and the next episode. It's not like you can stop covering a show, right?
I mean, it varies. Like, there are definitely shows that I've written about once. Like, I've done, like one review, and it's like, good, I'm done.
And it's not the pilot.
No, like, I just recently, one of the publications I've been writing for is the AV Club.
Yeah, they're fun.
They're great. They're lovely people. And
that's The Onion, right?
Yeah, but it's they are semi more serious. Like, they don't make active jokes of what they do.
Sure, right.
And I reviewed a show for them called Criminal just a couple weeks ago, and it's the only
TV show.
Yeah, it's actually a really interesting concept. It's a show. It's 12 episodes, but it's split across 4 different countries with 4 different casts, 4 different languages, 4 different writing directing teams.
Interesting.
But the central idea is it's basically like Law and Order, but all it is the interrogation scenes. And so they get really interesting actors to play basically the criminal du jour. And so it's like 3 episodes from the UK, 3 episodes from Spain, 3 episodes from Germany, and 3 episodes from France. Anyways, it's 12 episodes of television. Watched them all, reviewed them as just like a lump. And
before breakfast.
Right. Well, I imagine with any miniseries, you almost probably review it like a movie, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's like
Chernobyl. You review 1 episode at a time on a show like that.
I mean, I didn't cover that one, but I think that's a show like it's interesting because there's a lot of different kinds of TV reviews at this point. Like there's your standard. This review gets published like either on the embargo day or a couple of days before the show premieres.
And just actually to clarify in case people don't know what an embargo day is.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Basically, whenever you get screeners or advanced copies of a piece of content, whether it be a movie, whether it be a TV show, et cetera. Whether it means you go to a screening 2 weeks beforehand in a movie theater, or you get sent a link to a very decrepit website that lets you log in through multiple complicated factors.
Mind-blowingly bad website.
Like 400 watermarks.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
basically, it's top secret. When the embargo is broken, then you're allowed to talk about it publicly. Basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Like, and people skirt around it. If you follow critics on Twitter, like they'll sometimes like kind of hint at what they're watching, etc. The idea is the embargo date is meant to basically put publications on the same level. Like, everyone launches their review at the same time.
Right. No one has a scoop.
No one has a scoop, at least in terms of that. And it's actually, embargoes are really fun to track if you're this kind of nerd, and your audience might be. But let's say a movie like Frozen 2 is coming out soon. The fun game to play is, okay, you're let's say you're a savvy follower of media. Pay attention to when all of the reviews come out for Frozen 2, and then compare that to when the day the movie gets released, and note the time that all those movies come out. Like, because they're all those reviews come out, because the reviews across major publications, the major trades, probably most other pop culture media sites, they're all going to be the same. Because they've all been told you can publish a review at this time and not a second earlier, which means all of them will publish it at the exact same second.
Right. And that's for search traffic purposes and all of that, right?
Exactly.
Like, should I go see Frozen 2? The New York Times wants to be up there at the same time as Vulture and everybody else, right?
Exactly. And
but also if you've already read 4 reviews, are you going to read like the 5th review?
Right.
Right.
But the more important thing is also, like, you don't want to be the person who posts last. That's why everyone plays this game, and everyone's making sure that they're ready to go when the embargo breaks. And it's their serious not internally they're within publications. It can be like a real, like, it's not necessarily a fireable offense, but if you don't make your embargo, like, people are going to judge you for it.
Yeah.
And by the way, sometimes critics are right. Like, sometimes the embargo will be like 9 hours after the screening that they've been like. So there's all this weird politics to it, but the thing that you can track, that the general public can track if they pay attention, the amount of time between when the embargo for a movie is up versus when the movie comes out.
Right. So the closer the embargo release date is to the release of a movie,
the worse the movie they think. The worse they think critics will think it is.
Yes, because I mean, the thing is, all studios and networks are going to tell you, of course, we have full confidence in this product, etc. The actual truth is, the publicity departments, if they are aware that they're going to be that there are potential issues, that something might not land the way they wanted to with certain audiences, they are going to be careful about it. They are going to be calculating, and they are going to they're going to do things like, for example, sometimes there are certain studios that might make it harder for critics who are not, let's say, 100% in the bag for superhero movies. They're going to make it harder for them to see their superhero screenings.
Well, there was the famous thing with Fantastic Four where the director, Josh Trank, wrote that the movie's not good before the movie came out.
Broke his own embargo. Yeah.
Yeah, basically. I mean, and that's like...
And everyone at the studio knew that the movie had issues.
Yeah, everyone knows, right? They're all at those test screenings, critic screenings,
Even though we just interviewed this producer, Elaine Goldsmith Thomas. She did Hustlers. She's one of the producers, and she was like, we did not know if it was going to do well or not.
They didn't know it was going to be a hit, but Elaine also was like, I know this movie's great. Right. Which is kind of a different thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's knowing that the movie will connect with people, and knowing the movie will connect with audiences versus knowing the movie's good. Because there are tons of great movies that never really make that connection.
And then there's the movies that connect, like a movie, they're like in Austin Powers or something, where when it first comes out, people are not connecting with it, but then it just
my friend Brian Frank saw it 13 times in theaters.
That is a lot of times to see that particular movie.
Yeah. I was like, Brian, you know what's up. I saw it with him the second time.
Yeah. I actually, a movie I wasn't surprised failed to do well was The Kitchen, which came out this summer. I was rooting for it because, I always root for female filmmakers.
Sure.
Did you guys see it?
I didn't, and also it's based on a comic. And I'm a fan of the artist who draws it as well. It's
Okay.
kind of a bummer. Yeah.
But the thing is that randomly I happen to be on like one of those, a thing that happens in Los Angeles. A lot of times studios will do advanced special screenings for various films. And these will be like for the general public, and they're meant to be like essentially test screenings. The thing is, like, there's no exact science to the embargo date thing, though. If you Google embargo dates and try to dig around a little bit, you'll find some interest. People have like sat down and tried to write features about trying to figure out, like, does it actually mean that the movie is bad if the review embargo is like a week in advance?
When you say a feature, you mean like a think piece, not
Yeah,
like there's
exactly.
no movie
Not a
out
feature
there.
film.
Yeah.
I would love to read the Blacklist script about like someone who's cracked the code on the ratio of embargo dates.
I
to
mean,
release
somebody
dates.
like I bet there's definitely a Beautiful Mind-esque situation where someone could do that.
Well, you guys know about that.
If only it were
company-
2006, that'd be a great Funny or Die sketch.
Right. Well, you know about that company that, I don't know if they still exist, but you could send them your script and they would tell you what the opening weekend box office was going to be based
Right.
on this like neural network analysis.
Oh my god,
Yeah.
that sounds amazing.
Yeah,
Um,
and malarkey, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, malarkey. As someone who's kind of a spectator / interested party in this industry, like, one of the most exciting things about it is you can't necessarily predict stuff. Like,
Sure.
there's always surprises lurking in this industry and in the way things play out. It's been really genuinely exciting.
What can you think of an instance where you disliked a movie that the public loved and vice versa?
I mean, plenty of times, I'm sure. This is a perfect example, but I really enjoyed Yesterday just for what it was. And I read a lot of really harsh criticism of it, and I respect all the complaints they had. But I was like, yeah, it's a sweet enough romantic comedy
I
with
saw it with my in-laws.
Yeah.
It was real cute.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we had fun.
Yeah, I was at my mom's house and one of her friends was like, "Oh, my sister and I just went to see Yesterday. Yesterday, it was lovely."
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seemed like it could have that whole like greatest hotel and
Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, right?
Is it Marigold?
I think it is.
Okay, I'm getting Grand Budapest
Yeah.
Hotel is one,
Yes.
and then Best Exotic Marigold
Marigold
Hotel.
Yeah,
And then-
that's like a movie that I did not know anyone that watched, but my parents watch it, and then I just like, I think they made a sequel, right? Like, I
Yeah,
think,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
second Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, which I really appreciate as a title.
Yeah.
yeah, like, so it's one of those. I felt like Yesterday kind of had that thing where I saw some marketing about it for
Mm-hmm.
it, but not a ton. But it was these random people in my life that were not like film people necessarily were connecting with it.
Yeah, no, I think I think there's always like stuff like that. Like, I mean, one of my favorite things about TV in general is just like the fact that it's the rare media property that doesn't accumulate something resembling a fandom. Like, it's like, it was one of those things where like I every time I go to Comic-Con, I'm always like astounded by like the girls who will lose their crap during a panel because Paul Wesley is there.
I have no idea who that is.
I know. He was on the Vampire Diaries.
Okay, gotcha.
Like, and it's just like, but like, and it's one of those things though where it's like, you and I might not care about the Vampire Diaries, but that show ran for 7 seasons and had a spin-off and a huge fan base, and people get invested. Everything has like some audience out there, and it's just a matter of them some are much more quiet than others. Like, but yeah, it's beautiful. Like, people, even like the crappiest movie will have a fan somewhere.
Right.
I believe.
That's
Fingers
what I
crossed.
like about movies versus TV shows, is that you can spend millions and millions of dollars on it, and it comes out and it's on NBC. I guess canceled after the 7th episode or whatever.
Right.
And a year later, no one has ever heard of it, even though there were giant billboards. And then you can make a movie about the relationship between a salt and pepper shaker, and like for 15 years ago, and then someone's looking up movies, they're like, oh, there was a movie about condiments. You know,
Yeah.
like there's some staying power to a movie that I feel like TV, unless
Yeah.
TV has a certain threshold that it has to pass to be like
Right.
Cheers or Friends
which
or
is
The
pretty
Office.
significant too. Like, we're talking about like 5+ years of television, is when it really kind of like breaks through the cultural zeitgeist, I guess.
Well, it used to be that case anyway. Like, I mean, the whole reason that it used to be a big deal for a show to reach its fifth season is because of syndication.
Sure.
Which is where the real money is. Where real money was, rather.
Right.
Like, basically the way it worked in...
For the makers of the TV show, the producers.
Yeah, like famously, there's a interview with some producers who worked on Friends, kind of like a couple years after the show ended, and one of them was like, "Yeah, I don't have a second bathroom in my house if Monica and Chandler don't get together." Like
Right.
that extended the life of the show by a couple of years, and I have a really nice house now. My house would have been fine before,
Sure.
but my house is really nice now.
I mean, I remember the number, probably years ago now, but like Seinfeld made $1 billion just in syndication, just in reruns.
Oh, and it's still probably...
It's still making money, yeah.
Yeah.
But I want to back up a little bit, Liz. I want to talk about the way that you approach reviewing or criticizing something, because I think that there's oftentimes two kind of different preconceived notions about the way a critic approaches something.
Right.
I think there's the version where, and I think I thought of this much more when I was younger, of like the snooty, highfalutin, is it art or isn't it decree, right? Versus, that's just your opinion, man, right? Which are kind of two kind of pretty off base ideas, I think. And obviously, like, it's not a coincidence that you wrote about the X-Files because you fucking love that show, right? And I think personality maybe is more of a part of criticism than it used to be, right? As like the internet has made the nature of criticism change. But tell us about how you come to decide whether or not you're going to recommend a movie or TV show.
Well, I think you make a really good point about personality. And I think to go back a little bit in our history, one thing I really find fascinating about the idea of criticism is I think every critic has two audiences. One is the audience they know they're writing for and themselves. Like, I think like a lot of times it's kind of a balance between that. Like the only instinct you can go in on is your own. Like you can't basically watch a movie or a TV show and be like, well, I think people are going to feel like this, so I should definitely write my review along those lines. Like, for example, you can't, I didn't review this show, but Ava DuVernay's When They See Us. You can't plan to review that show thinking to yourself, well, this is going to be a really important Emmy-nominated series. It's very clear that's going to be the case. So ergo, I have to write about this like it's a critically acclaimed...
It's art, so I'm going to acclaim it as a critic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can't go into it that way. And like, I do think that there's a magnificence to that show. I do have criticisms of it. And I own those criticisms because, they were what stuck with me. There is a really fascinating element to it, though. Like, because one thing I always remember is back in the ye olde days of when you had a newspaper that came to your doorstep, and it was a newspaper like based in your city, and it was a critic that you were familiar with, like because you'd been reading them for quite some time. And like my grandmother lived in Sacramento all her life, or not all her life, but in the last several decades.
What
Matt's
up?
hometown.
Yeah. So Sacramento Bee subscriber.
Sure, big time.
And
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of the critic who wrote for them regularly.
Yeah.
She would
There
read.
There were two, and one of them I liked and one of them I didn't.
That's the thing. My grandmother knew which critic she agreed with and which critic she didn't. Based on who wrote the review, she would know how she felt about a movie. It's the grander national version of this is Siskel and Ebert came to movies from very different perspectives. And so there were people who would be Siskel people, and there would be people who were Ebert people. And so if Ebert...
Which one are you?
I wish I could say I was a Siskel person, but I feel like...
Oh my God. Ebert through and through.
Ebert's the populist, I think, more than Siskel. I think that's what it comes down to. And I think I generally fall more into an Ebert line of things. Like, I will legit, with a straight face, write a review of DC's Legends of Tomorrow, which is a incredibly silly show, but is so charming and so heartfelt and so well-meaning that I can't not love it.
I'm curious, like when you review stuff from like first-time filmmakers versus like a seasoned filmmaker, do you feel like it's charged with like you knowing more about where this is coming? Like, are you criticizing it as somebody that doesn't know anything about the filmmakers and the filmmaking industry and how they would think about it? Or do you find that you're preloaded with like, I have a DuVernay made, when they see us, that is different than John Miller, making it.
I think as a critic, you always try to take in backstory and you try to incorporate that. And I feel like I've always enjoyed reviews that made that will take like a couple of paragraphs and make a deep study of how this particular film fits into somebody's resume. I think what's interesting is on the flip side, if it's a first-time filmmaker, like I think a lot of those reviews can kind of fall into this person has a lot of potential and you can see where they're still figuring stuff out.
Or it's like, this is the arrival of a new voice.
Yeah.
That's more like a lot of like second features. Like there's a lot of like
Right.
Midsummer, I think, is a great example of like, we thought Ari Aster was going to be great and we were right.
I'm curious. So, and I'm sure there's no answer to this, but you know how in elementary school you learn how to write an essay and there's like your thesis in your first paragraph with some examples and 3 paragraphs of evidence and then you summarize everything.
Yeah.
Is there a structure that you use when you're writing a film review or a TV show review?
I mean, not really. Like it's honestly, I actually tend to start in the middle. Unless I know, like I'm in the shower and I come up with like the perfect idea for my lead, and then like I jot that down.
And the lead is the opening line?
The opening paragraph.
It's not the headline, though.
No, it's not the headline. And actually, fun fact, lead is in a lot of times in journalism speak spelled LEDE. There's actually
always throws me off. What is there a story behind that?
There is a story behind that. There's a lot of journalism terms that are deliberately misspelled. And the purpose is so that they catch the eye when you're proofing. For example, the big one is TK.
Sure.
It means to come. So let's say I'm waiting for the box office gross info on a movie, but I'm just trying to blast through my copy. I'll just put TK and it'll be there. And that's a reminder I need to put that back in. But there are more often than not, like that's the sort of thing you might overlook doing your second pass. So that's why people deliberately misspell words and, use like slang terms, like for headline, it's HED, head. For the deck or the subheadline, it's DEK, deck. And lead is spelled LEDE. I mean, it's not, I don't even know. That's not really necessarily a typographical thing, but it is like it's a weird quirk of the industry. Anyway, we were talking about
the structure of
of a review. I mean, I think everyone varies. Like one of the infamous things that people run into is the idea that, write your first draft of your review and then look at your first paragraph. And if it's like a paragraph basically about your day or your personal feelings or some weird backstory about your life, cut it.
I wish more recipe writers would take that advice.
God. Recipe writers are amazing in this regard. I can't.
Oh, yeah.
It is insane.
There is nothing my family has enjoyed more than when I accidentally put an extra stick of butter in.
My daughter Dakota and I were walking home with her au pair the other day.
But it's funny because in a TV pitch or a film pitch, any pitch, a lot of times people tell you to start it with a personal connection,
No,
yeah,
of course.
But I just wanted to know how to make the best chocolate chip cookies.
Yeah, grilled salmon.
Yeah.
I think what it comes down to is, and this is, I think, a thing that's really interesting about the way in which the way in which personality becomes involved, is I think people sometimes confuse personality for first person, and I mean one of my favorite film critics is David Ehrlich, who's at Indiewire right now, and all of his reviews are personal. All of his reviews are witty and sharp and very focused. He will put in his own personal reflections, but he doesn't lead with them, and he's very focused on the movie itself. And that's the thing. It's like, there are great writers out there who do an amazing job of making their work personal and real. Emily Vanderwerf at Vox is a great example of this. So she sometimes veers more towards self-insertion, if you will, than most publications would normally allow. But she never really does it without a good reason. And I think in general, the big thing is, I think I mentioned, you're thinking about your audience when you write. And your audience is showing up to see what you think of a movie. Your audience doesn't necessarily show up to see just what you think. Like, and you want to give them what they want.
That's
like,
a pretty big distinction, though.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
And when you say self-insertion, you mean like if she writes something like a particular part reveal in the middle of the movie made me drop my coffee.
Well, it's more just like, this. I had this personal experience when I was 14 years old.
Sure.
This
I
is
remember when I first saw so and so at 14.
Exactly,
Right.
and she's not like that. She generally, unless like, actually she recently came out as trans, and her joke is that she publicly came out like in a big way. With an essay that she also basically she referred to as her review of The Handmaid's Tale season 3, which it's a fitting topic. It's like she basically connected, the show with the fact that, in this year, our year of the Lord 2019, she's coming out publicly as a woman. Like, that's a big thing.
Sure. Yeah.
And a really fun choice to make right now in a really scary era.
Yeah.
So it all made sense and it all worked really well. But like, that's a really fascinating element.
I think, Liz, you bring up an interesting point in terms of the way that we are now sort of relating to critics, because when we were saying before, like, oh, am I a Siskel person or an Ebert person? I liked Ebert better, right? And then even just in terms of thinking of the critics that I regard, right, most of the time I think of them through podcasts. I think of I love the Slate Culture Gabfest, or like I love Film Week here in LA. So like the critics that I follow on Twitter and the ones that I'm like chasing their reviews, right, is partially, it's like a little bit more that cult of personality, a little bit more of like, oh, I think their point of view is interesting, and that's why I'm going to listen to what they have to say a little bit more. And also, like, at the movies is kind of the first time that you really saw critics in front of you, like on screen, really, right? Before that, it was always just, I guess there's like, Gene Shalit and, like the even maybe the local news, review show would be part of that on Friday nights or whatever. But for the most part, like, you didn't have quite as personal.
You didn't really
relationship.
see who was doing the writing.
Exactly.
I was going to ask you, and I love advice and tips. I was going to ask you some questions.
Yeah.
Kind of in that realm. So my first question is, do you have any tips on how to write a catchy headline? It's something that Matt and I are always struggling just in how to name our episodes.
Oh God. I mean, I think you want search terms and you want to convey a certain level of personality. I always struggle with headlines, but I think like,
is shorter better or not necessarily?
You don't want to go too short and you don't want to go too long. I think it also depends. Doing like the really snappy thing is if you can nail it, it's great. I like if it feels like one breath, I think that's a good length. Like, and I feel like also like, but I feel like, it's like if you can figure out a way to be bold with it, like that's also exciting.
Yeah. Because I think that skill is, when we're naming a podcast episode, or you're putting up a YouTube video, or you're writing a headline, obviously for an article, nowadays when you're competing so much for people's attention, I feel like that skill of telling people in like 5 words or less why they should care about what you're saying is a skill that's really important.
Hey, even just like an email subject line, it's the same.
Yes.
It's the exact same skill set. And sometimes like, just keeping it simple and being like, you don't want to go too simple. Like, just saying over and over again, this is, the Coen brothers are doing something different. Like, you can't do that. And then like 2 weeks later being like, Baz Luhrmann is doing something different.
I click on both of those though, for sure.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I think actually, to your point of key terms, I think that's a thing that we struggle with the podcast, is it's like you want to kind of like stuff the most recognizable credit in that title, but also like give context to what we're really going to be talking about, know?
And I think like honestly the toughest thing with headlines is you fall into formulas and you fall into like tropes. Like
that's what Matt is always upset with me back.
From like, X to Y.
Yeah, from Indiewire Critic to AV Club Dominator.
Yeah, exactly.
With Liz Shannon Miller.
Yeah, like one headline thing I see all the time, and I'm always trying to find ways to get around it, is how blank did blank.
Sure.
And it's like how hustlers shot their stripper scenes.
Right.
They pointed a camera at some women doing stripping. Like, that's how they did it. Like, I mean, admittedly, that's undermining like the nuance of that, but it's not a great example, but like,
Yeah, no, I get it.
you've seen it before.
Sure. Yeah. We've done it.
Yeah. Okay, next question.
Go.
So a lot of filmmakers. Obviously, you're friends with Matt from a long time ago,
Right.
and I'm assuming many other people. Do you ever give notes do people ask you for notes on their films, and does your career as a critic affect the way you respond to them?
Well, if someone asked me to give them notes on a movie, I wouldn't review it. It's tough because like this is a small town and you get to know so many people. Like there are definitely people who I am acquainted with that I would feel comfortable critiquing their work. I'd be upfront with them about it, of course, etc. But like, there are people that are on that level of acquaintance that I feel okay with. But then they're like good friends, so I'd be like, no, I'm gonna bow out of this. Like, and you have to, and that's like, of course, the toughest thing, and you have to be very careful about it because that will bite you in the ass, as we've seen in the past, if you aren't careful and you aren't like honest about it. Like, you have to be careful about this sort of thing. So. Yeah, I mean, I think like once it crosses over into the personal level, like that's when you have to make that call.
I mean, it does make me think of one of Jonathan Gold's last restaurant reviews was for a David Chang review, like his first LA restaurant, and like they're like famously friends, like they're on Ugly Delicious together, like they were buddies, and the review was rough.
Yeah.
It's like really tough. Yeah,
That's
after he was a huge champion for him for a long time.
Right.
Yeah, it's tough. Like you want to support your friends and you want to like celebrate their work, but you also have that pesky editorial, integrity thing.
And almost maybe like you kind of maybe course correct too hard. Like there's a little bit of like a reaction of like, well, I'm going to be hard on it because everyone knows we're friends.
Right.
For sure.
Do you ever have filmmakers respond to a not so nice review?
I've never I tend to be pretty lucky in that I rarely.
Do you want to talk about?
Did I review something mean of yours?
No. You actually, I don't think I've ever reviewed anything. Karina, pardon me.
Karina.
Yeah, you had reviewed Engaged.
Okay.
But we could talk about James Gunn.
Oh yeah, James Gunn got mad at me that one time.
So, sorry. So we'll
No,
back
it's
up.
okay.
Yeah,
Guardians of the Galaxy?
No, this is ages ago when he was he did this web series called PG Porn that I thought was stupid. Was it PG Porn or was it a different one? Anyway,
No. It was Spike one because I was working at Viacom at the time.
Oh, okay, that's why you remember this.
And it was like Human Z.
Human Z, yeah, that was stupid. But I mean, that was back when James Gunn wasn't woke. Back in his, I'll write a blog post that's just me talking about the 30 Marvel characters I really want to fuck.
To give people context, James Gunn had done a bunch of like B movies.
He's the director of the Guardians of the Galaxy
right?
movies.
But he hadn't become a big Hollywood mucky muck yet, and
also ex-husband of
so Jenna Fisher.
Yep.
I think they were. It doesn't matter where that timeline is, but basically he'd been doing these web series, and one of them was this show called Human Z that was just kind of like a gross out, like about like a human monkey man.
No, there's this period of his career, and he's been upfront he's been up front in recent years. Back a couple years ago, I was doing all this. I was kind of an asshole, and I was doing all this gross stuff, and I took issue with this one show he did, and I wrote a negative review, and he called me out and I think I've actively chosen to forget what nice words he wrote about me on his blog, but he wrote a blog post that was just like Shannon Miller is an idiot or something, and
just but like explicitly mean at you, not just like how dare people not get my art. Like, no, you are stupid for thinking this.
Well, it's
was
like,
the idea behind it.
Yeah,
basically.
and I think honestly the thing of it is like it was unpleasant at the time, but like at the same time, like James Gunn being mad at me on his blog, I'll take that 100 times over me getting yelled at on Twitter. But
sure,
like I just recently at the end of August when the newest Rise of Skywalker trailer came out, I tweeted something very offhand about how, as a girl growing up, like all I ever wanted to see was a girl using a lightsaber on screen.
Right.
And the stupid tweet of mine ended up in the Twitter moments section around the release of the trailer. And a lot of people wanted to make sure I knew that Ashoka Tand existed, which I knew. Like, she's a female Jedi from the animated series franchises.
Right.
And it's like, no, I know this character exists. I've never gotten into Clone Wars. I'm sorry. Please stop telling me it exists. Dude number 400. Like, yeah, James Gunn, go ahead and blog your ass off about me. Like,
right.
I just stay out of my mentions. Like, people are assholes sometimes. Again, like, I get it so less badly than other people do. Like, I know of, like, there are critics I know, like, there's this one woman who reviewed Joker, and it's just like, she did not care for it. And holy crap, she's gotten death threats on Twitter from people who haven't even seen the movie. They're just mad at her.
Yeah. Well, Goodreads, I hear, is even worse. Like the book reviewer site. And that site can really make or break like an author.
So Liz, I have a pet peeve in terms of like when people are pitching us, and I would love for you to weigh in.
Sure.
And I am aware that like we have like a very, DIY audience, right? And I love to celebrate that and appreciate that. But I never want the pitch to be, look how cheap I made this movie for, right?
Yeah. We shot this in one day.
Yeah. Like I want it to be like, this movie is incredible for these reasons. And also, can you believe, as a footnote, can you believe we made it for $2?
Yeah.
That's all. That's my point.
Do you agree?
No, I mean, I think there's
the qualifications of why something is not good are meaningless, right?
I mean, I think like you could spend 60 days shooting something and it can be crap, and you can spend a week shooting something, it can be amazing. Like I went to an indie television festival, and I think there were 2 different shows that both were shot in 3 days, and one of them was, you could tell it was shot in 3 days, and it felt like it, and it felt a little flimsy. But there was one that was shot in 3 days, and I was like, fuck you, that was shot in 3 days. Like,
yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, the most important thing is the quality. Like, and yeah, like you said, if it's a footnote, like I 100% agree with you on that. Like, I think that's just basically, that's what matters. Like,
do you have other pet peeves in terms of like when people are pitching you to review something?
I think when people don't understand that, no is no.
Sure. Yeah.
By the way, I was going to say in contrast, like I just recently watched for the first time The Love Witch, which is this really well-made feature film. And it took the creator, it took that woman, the woman who directed it, 7 years to make that movie.
Yeah.
And it's exquisitely made.
Did you write a review about it?
No. I was on a podcast that covered it.
I can't remember what critic mentioned this about that movie, but like, it's so rare to see a movie that's so specifically a singular vision. When you talk about vision, like The Love Witch is a perfect example of it. It's like so stylized, so surreal, so strange, and so intentional. And like there's nothing accidental about it.
Right. But at the same time, it's because she spent 7 years making it.
Right. That's true.
But yeah, I think like honestly, I think, beyond like the normal, like, observe basic social graces, like no means no. Every critic has way too much on their plate already. It's like, I think not understanding that, in a lot of times, especially like even if I'm just doing a review, if I'm just doing a review or an interview or something, like knowing that there has to be a strong hook. Like it's like, I'm not just going to review something because you asked me real nice.
Yeah. Do you like for them to pitch the hook when they're emailing you?
I mean, I don't want them to dictate what the story should be. And I've had people do that, like be like, here are all the exciting angles surrounding this. Mm-hmm. Like if I'm going to get engaged with something, it has to be because I'm personally intrigued by it. And that's the trickiest thing. It's like, but like, this is telling me all the elements of, I think that's the thing. It's like, tease the elements, tease what makes it exciting and new and fresh. Don't necessarily feel like you need to write the story for me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Interesting. Because when I used to like email, PR outlets to try to get them to cover like my viral video or whatever, I would always like try to like give the
make it
headline
easy for them.
in the email subject.
Well, I mean, like you can. That's the thing. Like it's a power of suggestion rather than explicit, like
right.
dictation.
Right. Cool. Okay, my last question.
Sure.
So, your job is basically telling people if they did a good job or not on their filmmaking. And I remember when I was a kid and my friends would play a video game or something and be like, oh, this video game sucks. And I'd be like, oh yeah, let's see you make a video game like this. Do you ever, you've been doing this for a while now. Are you ever tempted to just make the perfect movie or TV show yourself?
The thing is, I've made my own shorts. I've been on the other side of things, on a number of different levels, and I know how hard it is. I think that's part of what makes me good at this, frankly, is that I know enough to respect the craft and know what it takes to make this. Like, I don't take it for granted. Like, even when I hate something and I'm mad at everyone involved, like, I still respect the fact that they made it and that they took that risk and they put themselves out there and they invested their time and money. And maybe I think it's a bad investment, but same time, like, I know this. Like, it is like, on the one hand, it is the cheapest and easiest thing to be like, you don't know how hard it is, etc. Like, it is easy to write people off that way. Easy to write off criticism that way. And frankly, here's the thing. As someone who's been criticized, I've produced plays that have gotten bad reviews. I've written tweets that have gotten me yelled at on the internet. Like, as a creator, like, if you're going to let like a bad review dictate whether or not you keep pursuing what you're doing, like, then what are you doing? Like, and so honestly, if what
that's why I don't make video games anymore.
Right.
And honestly, here's the thing. Like, I understand if I read a negative review of something and it hurts your feelings and you feel bad, and what makes you feel better is to say that person's a bitch and I don't care what she thinks and she's a dum-dum and whatever. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. Like, great, congratulations. Like, hopefully you read some of the critiques. Hopefully you kind of internalized some of the messaging. Hopefully what I was saying wasn't wasted. But at the same time, like, as someone who's been on both sides of it, like, I understand totally how hard it is. And I think honestly, the big thing is the review. Again, this goes back to knowing your audience. A lot of times, especially when I was reviewing web series, like, my purpose in reviewing web series was to tell people whether or not it was worth them clicking on a link. Like,
sure, yeah.
Like, and so it was not for creator likes the review. That's great. But really, the audience is people looking for stuff to watch.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Liz, this was great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Shall we hop into unpaid endorsements?
Unpaid endorsements.
My unpaid endorsement is for a Kickstarter video that's a couple years old for a show that was going to go to Edinburgh. And it's like not that good, if I'm being honest. It's like a totally fine Kickstarter video, but that's kind of the point. It shows a ton of potential, we'll say that. And it's for a little one-woman show called Fleabag. And it won a shit ton of Emmys not that long ago. And I think it's really charming because I think it shows you...
Is it Phoebe Waller-Bridge
It's Phoebe Waller-Bridge and the woman who plays her best friend in that first season who she opens the cafe with. Yeah, not to spoil anything, but anyway, they were friends and had a theater company together called Dry Wit, and like needed like $3,000, $5,000, something like that to put up a show at Edinburgh. Yeah. Which like, and it's like your standard straight up internet, Kickstarter video. They were explaining to us like why they have to pay a theater tech and like how Edinburgh is an expensive experience and that they're not made of money and that they just need a little bit to get them there. And like, maybe 200 people contributed to the Kickstarter. It was not.
And did she give away like ownership of the show?
I should have looked at what their incentives were actually when you're checking it out. But one thing that is great is Phoebe is wearing like a cheap Batman costume for the whole time without
perfect.
Without no real reason. Yeah. And it does have a lot of charm to it, but it is not anything special. It is not the best Kickstarter video. You're not like, oh, that person is a genius who's about to make a masterpiece, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's really pretty encouraging for all of us to like watch that and remember that it was not that long ago that
Right. Even award-winning geniuses were not always geniuses.
exactly.
Also, I think like if you look at the credits for that video, and I forget his name, but the director of that, the guy who essentially directed and shot the Kickstarter video, is actually a known indie director now.
Oh, great. Perfect.
Yeah, it's worth maybe looking up and putting in the notes or something. But somebody pointed that out, and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, pretty great.
Well, it speaks to like the community that surrounds a lot of creators. It's
Sure.
like, you don't make stuff on your own.
Right.
Like you have friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my unpaid recommendation is a Netflix dramedy / post-apocalyptic thing called Daybreak. And it is
I think I've seen a trailer for it.
Yeah, I've seen 5 episodes of it at this point. I believe it's going to be a 10-episode season. And essentially it's very transparently Ferris Bueller in the post-apocalypse.
That's definitely the actual pitch that they must have taken in.
Yeah, and then they went ahead and cast Matthew Broderick as the high school principal.
Right.
But there's a real spark of imagination to it. It's really inventive in terms of its storytelling. And one of the things I really like about it is the fact that the first 2 episodes are told from the point of view of, our plucky young straight white boy hero. And he talks directly to the camera. He's engaging enough. But then the subsequent episodes change the point of view. And it's like the, preteen girl gets an episode and other characters get episodes and the style changes accordingly. And it's not like a perfect show, but there's so much, it's having so much fun, and it's really playing with the format. And I imagine that when there's either one or two things has happened by the time this comes out. Either this has made a really big splash and people are really excited about talking about it, or no one's watched it, in which case, hey, go check out Daybreak. If you like the idea of a lot of crazy pop culture stuff all thrust together in a post-apocalyptic environment.
Right.
The other thing I'm going to mention is I don't want to say I get frustrated when I hear that people who live in Los Angeles and work in the industry don't watch BoJack Horseman, but I feel like everyone who doesn't is missing out. Like, it is one of the best shows about Hollywood ever made. It is heartbreaking and beautiful and also hilarious. And I think like it's tough going at times, but it's entering its final season right now, and I'm not really ready to talk about that, but I am. I do think it's a really special show, and also has some of the best jokes about this town, bar
Period.
none.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I gotta get back onto BoJack.
Yeah, me too, actually.
I've seen the first 2 episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it takes a little bit of time, right?
Yeah, I hate to be that like person where it's like, oh, it takes this number of episodes to get good, but really it's like, I believe it's episode 7 or this is what I always say. It's like episode 7 or 8. It's called The Telescope. Mm-hmm. If you get to the telescope and you finish the telescope and you're not in, fine, bail. Like 100%. But like the telescope is where it really finds its tone.
Well, cool. Okay, so my unpaid endorsement. There's this saying in the grip world: if you can't tie a knot, tie a lot. Which means like, part of the job of a grip is to like tie things down so they don't fly in the wind and hurt actors or whatever. And you're supposed to know a lot and know how to tie knots. But if you're just starting out and you don't really know how to tie knots, you tie something like 1,000,000 times. That's what I'm doing with these unpaid endorsements. I don't have a great one, but I'm going to give you 3 shitty ones real quick. Number 1 is the article I referred to earlier in this interview. It's called The Formula, and it's in the New Yorker, and it's by Malcolm Gladwell, written October 8th, 2006. And it's about what if you built a machine to predict hit movies. And it's about this company and how they analyze scripts to let you know how much money they'll make.
Awesome.
So it is a real thing written by a guy that's, kind of known. Number 2, something I talked about on a previous episode was that if you have an iPhone, you can say, "Hey Siri, call Matt Enlow on speakerphone." As of iOS 13, and I don't know if it's related to the new iPhone or not, you can if you just put your phone on the table and you say, "Hey Siri, call Matt Enlow," it will know that it should call on speakerphone because the phone is not up to your face.
That's cool.
So it'll say
pretty cool,
calling
yeah.
Matt and Lo on speakerphone. So awesome feature just for. I mean, I don't think people even hold their phones up to their face anymore, right?
No, yeah, with
That's not a
speakerphone-
thing.
Yeah, I mean, I do all the time, but like, I'd much rather do speakerphone.
Yeah,
It's
because you're
just,
always
am I
multitasking,
being rude
right?
to someone else, basically, or not?
I got made fun of actually recently for doing that because they're like, "What are you, a contestant on a reality show? Are you at the Whole Foods trying to consult with your top chef teammate?"
Right.
Good burn.
And
Yeah.
my third one, this is the dumbest endorsement of all time, but like I took a flight yesterday on Southwest Airlines, and I think everyone knows this, but if you don't, you can change your tickets for free on Southwest. Like I was supposed to fly out of SFO, and it was more convenient for me to fly out of Oakland, and it was the same price ticket, and I just changed it. It was like no penalty at all. And
Very
I just
cool.
love that because every other airline would be like $200 to do that.
Right, yeah.
Way to go, Southwest.
I didn't know that, actually. That's pretty great.
Yeah, and if you can cancel a flight and you'll get the full credit. Let's say that flight costs $250. You just get like $250 to spend on Southwest anytime you want.
That's pretty good to know. I'm always anxious about that. I've actually got one final endorsement just to pile on at the end because we talked so much about Ebert, the documentary Life Itself, which is about the life of Roger Ebert, is the movie I've cried in the most.
Oh, cool. I
It's
should
like
watch that.
it's really wonderful. It's
I watched
like,
a movie next to him once.
Really?
I'm sure you've probably done it a million times.
Next to Ebert? No.
Yeah, it was at Sundance. It was like
oh man,
What movie?
it might have been a shorts program actually.
Oh, okay.
But it was 5 shorts. Or it might have been Murder Ball. Do you guys remember
Oh
that
sure,
movie?
yeah.
Oh, that movie
The
is
documentary?
great.
Yeah, it's great.
But I was like, that's Roger. There was only because my friend, he was the guy that he was an volunteer there, and he let people into the Critic. They have like a special screening room for critics to
Right.
watch movies, and he just let me into every screening.
Nice.
And it was all critics. It was awesome. Awesome. Well,
Thanks so much, Liz.
if we want to find out more about you, how do we follow you and send mean comments on Twitter?
Well, I'm at Lizlet. That's LIZLET on Twitter. I also have a website, LizShannonMiller.com, which is kind of just like a splash page receptacle of all my links.
Cool. Well, if
Yeah.
you want to find out more about our show and this interview and this conversation, go to justshootitpodcast.com. And we're across all social media at justshootitpod. I'm on Instagram at okaplan. And by the way, I've been trying to post a little bit less pictures of my daughter and more pictures of like movie-related things.
Yeah, she was actually kind of bummed about that. She was
Yeah. Well, I almost posted a picture of her yesterday, and I was like, my Just Shoot It followers, they're going to be pissed.
They're going to be mad. Well, I can't wait for those BTS pics. You can follow me at Mr. Matt and Low. This show is edited by Sarah Weirda. It's produced by Madeline Rosewat. Our webmaster is Yolan Williams, and you're listening to music provided by the Free Music Archive by the artist Jazar.
See ya.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.